Chapter 3. As strangers' eyes, the bell above the door chimed late in the afternoon, a sound that usually lifted Naomi's spirits. Today, it grated like a warning. She looked up from her counter. The man who entered was not one of her regulars. He moved with measured ease, tall and deliberate, rain-dark hair slicked back from his forehead. His coat dripped faintly onto the rug, though outside the storm had long since broken. His gaze swept the shelves before settling on her. Something in that look was steadying, piercing, but not invasive. Naomi's pulse slowed despite herself. "Afternoon," he said, voice smooth and unhurried. Naomi inclined her head, but didn't answer. She had grown wary these past days, too aware of the store's restless energy. Strangers felt dangerous now. The man drifted toward the history section, trailing his fingers along the spines as if reacquainting himself with old friends. Naomi pretended to busy herself with receipts, though her eyes followed him in the glass reflection of a cabinet. He paused before a shelf near the back, the same shelf that had thrown its contents across the floor the day before. A single book sat slightly crooked, its spine etched with the same symbol Naomi had seen in the ledger, the eye within a circle. The stranger pulled it free and carried it to the counter. He laid it down between them without a word. Naomi's throat tightened. "Unusual collection you keep," he said finally. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not for sale." His brows lifted slightly, though not with surprise, more as if he'd expected her answer. "I wasn't asking to buy." Their eyes met fully now. His were gray, pale but alive, the kind of eyes that seemed to read past flesh and bone into whatever truths a person thought best hidden. For a moment, Naomi felt exposed, stripped of her careful composure. The voices stirred again. A faint hiss, winding through the store, rising from nowhere and everywhere at once. Naomi stiffened, but the man did not react. Either he didn't hear them, or he was used to hearing far worse. He tapped the book's cover with one finger. This symbol, it belonged to a fraternity of bookkeepers in the late 19th century. Secret of men. They believed ledgers could bind more than numbers. Debts of blood. Debts of soul. Naomi's stomach turned cold. She hadn't spoken a word of the ledger hidden in her office drawer. The man's gaze softened, as if sensing the question burning behind her silence. "Julian Carter," he said, offering a name instead of an explanation. "Historian. Local archives." She gave nothing back. Names were currency, and she wasn't ready to spend hers. Julian smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. "This place feels restless." Naomi's shoulders squared. "It's just a bookstore." But even as the words left her lips, a book slid from a nearby shelf and landed with a muted thud. Neither of them flinched. The silence stretched between them, taut as wire. Finally, Julian inclined his head, not in farewell, but in recognition, as though marking her as someone already entwined in a story far older than either of them. When he left, the bell chimed again. Naomi exhaled slowly, the sound shaking in her chest. She glanced at the counter, where the book still rested, though she hadn't seen him leave it behind. The symbol on its spine seemed to watch her. For the first time in years, Naomi felt something she couldn't label as fear or anger. It was something more dangerous. It was pull. Chapter 4. The ledger breathes. Night pressed heavy against the bookstore windows, turning the glass into black mirrors. Naomi sat at her desk, the ledger open once again. She told herself she had only wanted to study it, to understand what it wanted from her. But the truth was harder. She couldn't stay away. The ink shifted under her gaze, lines crawling like living veins across the page. Her name remained etched there, but new words formed beneath it. Words she didn't write, words written in that same curling hand. "Julian Carter." The air stilled. Naomi pushed back in her chair, breath sharp, palms damp. The ledger had pulled him into her orbit, dragged him into the story without permission. Or maybe it had always known he was part of it. A sound at the front door cut through her racing thoughts. The bell didn't chime, yet the lock clicked. Slowly, the door swung open. Julian stepped inside. Naomi's pulse jumped, anger and relief colliding. She should have demanded how he'd entered, why he'd come back uninvited. But the words died in her throat when his eyes met hers. Something in the air shifted between them, sharp and electric. He looked different in the dim light, his gray eyes reflecting the lamp's glow like silver coins. "I tried to stay away," Julian murmured, voice low, strained. Naomi rose, every muscle taut. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." They stood across the room, but the distance felt fragile, as though the space would collapse if either of them breathed too deeply. The ledger's pages shivered, though there was no wind. Naomi wanted to send him away. Instead, her feet carried her closer. She hated the way her body betrayed her, the way her chest ached as if something larger than herself pulled her forward. Julian's hand brushed the edge of the desk. His fingers lingered near the ledger, but he didn't touch it. His gaze remained locked on her. "This book is dangerous," he whispered. "But it wants you. And it won't stop until you claim it." The whispering voices rose around them, louder now, swirling like a storm. Naomi felt them pressing into her skull, urging, binding, demanding. Julian stepped closer, too close. She could smell rain on his coat, smoke on his skin. His nearness was a risk, a mistake she should never allow, but the weight of the voices pressed her toward him, as though the book itself had already chosen. Naomi's hand lifted of its own accord, fingertips grazing his jaw. The contact sparked heat through her body, sharp and frightening. His breath caught, but he didn't pull away. "Tell me to leave," he said, the words almost a plea. Naomi didn't answer. The voices hushed all at once, leaving the store in breathless silence. For a moment, it was only the two of them, standing at the edge of something that felt like ruin and salvation wrapped together. The ledger snapped shut with a crack like thunder. Naomi flinched, breaking their gaze. The spell shattered, leaving only her racing heart and the awareness that she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Julian stepped back, but the hunger in his eyes lingered. "It's begun," he said softly. Then he turned and left, the door closing behind him with the finality of a vow. Naomi pressed her trembling hand against the desk. The ledger pulsed beneath the leather cover, alive, feeding. She wasn't sure if it wanted her power, her soul, or her heart, and she feared it might already have all three.